What is up, guys? It is Intellitech Studios here with another review. By popular demand, we're going to be reviewing an iPhone because I've gotten plenty of requests to review several iPhones. So I've got a couple iPhones here that we'll be reviewing. But today we're going to be focusing on the latter, which is the iPhone 7. One of the most controversial yet also best-selling iPhones that Apple has ever released. The iPhone 7 basically took the design of the iPhone 6s, added a couple minor little improvements, some sort of creature comforts, as well as some little improvements that kind of enhanced the overall experience, added a few new fun colors, and basically re-released it as the iPhone 7, and in the case of the 7 Plus, also added a second camera for a little bit of extra photography features, and that's basically the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus. Anyways, I'll see you guys later. No, I'm just kidding. So the iPhone 7 is, of course, it released in 2016. It released in September of 2016. So it definitely competes with some other devices around the same time, also with very similar numbers in their naming scheme. So plenty of 7s in the year 2016. We had the Galaxy S7, the iPhone 7, the Axon 7, all sorts of stuff. But the iPhone 7 is probably the most popular 7 out of all of those 7s. Because how many people do you know nowadays using iPhone 7s versus Galaxy S7s? And especially, how many people do you know who are using iPhone 7 Pluses as opposed to Galaxy Note 7s? Yeah, thought so. So the iPhone 7 is very popular. I believe it was the second best-selling iPhone after the 6, because the 6 and 6 Plus were the best-selling iPhones. And I believe number 3 was the 4S, but I'm going off memory, so I could be completely wrong. And I do have a 4S as well. So this is the matte black, not the jet black. If it was jet black, it would basically look exactly like the 4S, or like, any of these other glass-backed black phones. So, but, it's not. It's matte black. And I actually really like the matte black. Usually my favorite is space gray, and I am kind of sad that, they don't have space gray for the iPhone 7. But this matte black, which I remember back whenever these were leaking, people called it space black, which I think sounds cooler, but, then again, none of their space gray color schemes ever match up with each other. So they honestly should have just called it space black. They should have called the colors on the iPhone 8 and 10, they should have called that space black instead of space gray, because it's not gray, it's black, but whatever. So iPhone 7, we have a 4.7-inch, out of habit, I almost said 1080p display, but it's not 1080p display. It is a 1334 by 750 display, the exact same as the iPhone 6, the exact same as the iPhone 8. It's the same screen. However, what this does have is the color schemes, or not color schemes. It has fancier colors. I forgot what the terminology was. I think it was wide gamut or something like that. The point is that the colors are a little bit crispier than they are on the 6S, and honestly, that holds pretty true. The colors on this screen are pretty good. Of course, it's IPS, so you don't have the best blacks, but you don't have to worry about burn-in, so that thing is kind of nice. If I compare this to my Galaxy Note 7, if I just unlock this, because the fingerprint sensor is dead on mine, you can see that if I go into all of my, if I go into some options here, you can see there's a little bit of burn-in on the screen. So yes, the screen does look nicer on Galaxy phones, but the screen's burned in a little bit, There's a little bit of artifacting from the fact that the device has a little bit of age to it, and the AMOLED screen has aged and has had a lot of persistent images. Whenever I boot this up, I can see like little imprints from a keyboard on it from the previous owner constantly typing a lot. And that's something that you won't have to deal with on the iPhone 7. So yeah, you kind of get that trade-off from LCD to AMOLED because of the fact that you don't have to worry about burn-in, but the colors aren't as incredibly amazing looking. It's a little bit more true to life, and the actual calibration on this display is very good. So yes, while the resolution isn't the best, and obviously if you want resolution, you're going to want to step up to the iPhone 7 Plus, and if you really want resolution, you're going to have to step up to something like the Galaxy S7 Edge, but this iPhone 7 actually has a pretty decent display. On the iPhone 6 and 6S, I thought the display was absolute trash, but on the iPhone 7, it's actually not bad. Like, yeah, I can see pixels if I get really close to it, but it doesn't bother me. For some reason, it bothered me a lot on the 6S, yet for some reason on the 7, it doesn't bother me. I don't know why. I don't know if that's just a placebo, if I've gotten used to it. I'll have to probably check out a 6S again. But, I mean, I'm not complaining. The screen looks pretty good on the iPhone 7. And considering it's the thing you're going to be looking at the most, then that's pretty good. Also, it's amazing for one-handed use, which is really nice. It also, you know, because it has the one-handed use, you don't have any curved corners as well. So, unlike the newer Galaxy phones and newer iPhones, you don't have notches cutting into your screen. You don't have fancy rounded corners cutting off certain parts of your screen. It's just a square, you know. It's just a straight-up square. So if you're looking at something and you're in landscape view, you know, you'll just be able to see the whole thing. It'll be great. Of course, if it's like 2:1 or something, if you're watching MKBHD, might be a little bit pillar boxed or letterboxed, but again, the experience is still good, and there definitely is a reason why people would prefer these older designs that have have widescreen 16:9 aspect ratios, especially when it comes to viewing content, because the curved corners kind of mess up with that a little bit. And even the iPhone 4S didn't even have a 16:9 display. It had like, I forgot what, I think this is like 5:4 or something, or 4:5, something like that. And I know the iPhone 5 went to 16:9. So, that's something I actually didn't even realize until recently, that this isn't a 16:9 display. So, or at least I don't think it is. Either way. So the screen on this is still pretty good, and I don't really have any complaints as far as the screen goes. So that's one thing that's definitely good. Is it still recording? Yes, it is. So, so that's one thing that's really nice, is that the screen is surprisingly good, considering the resolution isn't all that impressive, considering that it doesn't have a bunch of super fancy features. Of course, it has like all the night shift modes and stuff like that. So it has the night mode with iOS 13, and you also have, when you go into settings, I have this set up with dark mode because, come on, it's a matte black iPhone. Of course I'm going to put on dark mode. I have dark mode on all my devices. If you see, again, going back to the note, if I actually open this up, you can see I have this all dark moded out. So, well, it's not really dark mode on this, it's just a black theme, but still, you know, I like dark things. Even on non-black devices, I still like dark mode. It's easier on the eyes, it looks nicer. You know, it kind of reminds me of like the old school days of just sitting in a full screen Windows 10 command prompt. Well, not Windows 10, but like Windows XP command prompt, where it's just a black screen with white text. For some reason, that just feels kind of, it just feels comfortable. I don't know, it's hard to describe. Some people say the light mode's better for your eyes. Whatever, I don't care. I like dark mode. And I'm super happy that they introduced dark mode with iOS 13. So that also helps with the screen as well, because you have more options to make the screen look nicer. So that's one thing that's nice about the iPhone 7 and with iOS 13. Of course, this would also help if you have an iPhone 6S. And I don't believe the iPhone SE got iOS 13. I don't think so. Either way, the iPhone SE is too small anyways. And I used to think that this was too small, and I still kind of think it is. I know one of my friends asked me if I would switch to this full time and stop using my Note. And the truth is I really can't, because like this is just way too small for me. And he was like, quit making excuses. And I'm like, I'm not making excuses. I just hate tiny phones. I mean, at least in terms of like using them as a main device. Like this is the smallest I'll go as far as a phone, and this is a Note. So, you know, this is the smallest I would even consider going. Maybe the S7 Edge, which is barely smaller than this. But yeah, but even this is too small, this is way too small, and this is just a joke. I mean, come on, this looks like a baby's toy. So, but the iPhone 7, if you're a person who likes, you know, compact designs, then this is definitely a fantastic phone. And if you don't like compact designs, then get the 7 Plus. So, you have a couple options there. And for one-handed use, this is still easily the best, pretty much the best phone that you can get. Same thing with the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 6. It's just great, you know. So if you're a person who wants a bit of a smaller phone than the iPhone 7, I keep harping on this because I feel it's a very underrepresented demographic. Not everyone is like me where they really want big phones. A lot of people like these smaller, compact phones. And this is still a great option, even in 2019. Sorry to kind of spoil it a little bit, but, you know, it is what it is. And again, this is the same size as the iPhone 8 and the 6, so it's not really spoiling it. I'm just talking about the size. So, 4.7 inches, not enough for me. I mean, I need at least like 5.7 inches, but 4.7 inches for you might be good enough. And, you know, maybe even bigger, maybe even smaller, just depends. I mean, because this is like, what, like a 4-inch screen, something like that. But either way. So 4.7 inches is great for one-handed use, but like for a lot of multimedia stuff, I found myself holding the phone a lot closer to my face, which obviously isn't good for your eyes. And I'm sure if I actually took the time to get used to it, maybe I could get used to having a small phone again, but it's just not comfortable. I just don't like it. So at least for me. Now, of course, you know, one thing that's an advantage of this that I don't mention often enough is that the smaller phones are always cheaper. So price point could also be a very big factor as far as whether or not you get the smaller versus larger phones if you're fairly adaptable and you can go with either size. So that's one thing to note is that, is that the iPhone 7, the standard edition that you see here, is great for people who want to spend a little bit less money, and maybe they don't care about the extra camera lens and they just want something that works. Then the iPhone 7 will be a pretty good option for you. So if we look on the back, we also have the camera there, and the camera is pretty good. You know, if I open up the camera, actually let's do it from Control Center. So the camera is really nice, and I'm about to sneeze. Maybe not. But anyways, here's the here's the Note 7. So both of these cameras are very, very nice. They both kind of have their advantages and disadvantages. Of course, these cameras are about the same age. I mean, technically the Note 7's camera comes from the S7, which came out earlier in the iPhone. You get the point. But both of these cameras are actually pretty solid, and they both have a little bit of advantages. I think that the iPhone 7's camera looks a little bit more true to life, and the Note 7's camera looks a little bit more vibrant. But you may prefer one or the other. And of course, iPhones and Galaxies both have a ton of modes and stuff, and of course they both have their various selfie cameras that you can open up. And I honestly think that the Note 7's selfie camera is actually surprisingly not as good as the iPhone's, just looking at it right now. But the Note 7 also has the wider angle, so you can fit more people into it. But I actually just now realized, I was like, yeah, the iPhone actually, I think, has a better front-facing camera. But I think the Note 7 has a better rear-facing camera, and that's just my personal preference. So, I forgot the iPhone does that weird screen flash thing. That always blinds me whenever that happens. But we can see both these photos. Of course, they took a little bit different angles because the phones are facing different ways, but you can see they're both fairly high-quality pictures. And again, this kind of shows how the Galaxy has the picture that's a little bit zoomed out more, so you could, if there were people behind me, if I had, what are those things called? Friends, they'd be able to fit into the picture a little bit more, whereas with the iPhone, they're kind of more squished. But, you know, of course you can always just hold your phone back more, but, you know, that's just a pain. So, again, that's all up to personal preference. And, what? Okay, so, yeah, so anyways, so that's the camera, and it works pretty well, and honestly, the camera's still very, very good. And especially if you have the 7 Plus, that's when you get portrait mode and stuff like that. And, you know, portrait mode looks very, very nice. I remember one of my old Facebook profile pictures was a portrait mode photo I took with my friend's iPhone 10. And it looked very, very nice. I was pretty impressed with it. Wasn't perfect, but it definitely was pretty impressive. So, we also have, speaking of cameras, we also have the earpiece up by the camera. And one thing that's nice is that they actually, I'm glad it took Samsung 2 extra years to do this, about 1.5 years to do this with the Galaxy S9, but they added earpiece backup from the speaker, from the bottom firing speaker. So when you actually listen to something, the speaker quality is actually really, really nice. So I'm just going to log into both these phones here, and we're going to play a YouTube video, and I'm going to go ahead and play one from me, just to avoid copyright, because I'm probably going to refilm my S6 review just because of this. Yeah, SwiftKey doesn't have full permissions on the iPhone right now, so its keyboard sucks. But yeah, so let's open up, I don't know what video I should open up. I want to open up the same video on both. I'm trying not to waste too much time, so here we go. What about my Galaxy S6 unboxing? Oh, ads. Of course, both of these ads are from Amazon. For some reason, this skip ad button is super hard to press on an iPhone. I don't know why. Come on, ad. So if we grab the iPhone and we turn it up.
What's up guys, it's Intelitech Studios with a quick unboxing of a Samsung Galaxy S6. Now, earlier this year I got a request to do a review on the standard Samsung Galaxy S6.
So that's the iPhone 7. It sounds a little bit muffled, a little bit distorted, but it has a much fuller sound because of the fact that it comes out of both speakers, and I think that's very wonderful, whereas compared to the Note, which, when we start this up,
yeah. Guys, this is Intelitech Studios with a quick unboxing of a Samsung Galaxy S6. Now, earlier this year, I got a request to do a review on the standard Samsung Galaxy S6.
So, I think the Note 7 speaker actually sounds a little bit clearer, and of course that's the same, this is the same as the S7 speaker. So, I know like people are like, oh, how useful is that? You can't even buy this anymore. Yeah. But the S7 is basically the same when it comes to the speaker. So, yeah, it's just what I have on hand. So, the speaker actually sounds a little bit better to me on the Note, but on the iPhone, it's a little bit clear. Well, it's weird because this sounds fuller, but this sounds clear, so it's really bizarre. I think this could be a defect with my iPhone, why it's sounding a little bit distorted, whereas that's not a problem with my Note. And I think my Note is in a little bit better condition than the iPhone, minus that. So that could be playing an effect on here, but I don't know. But the speaker still on the iPhone is pretty good, and it's definitely not a knock against it. It's definitely one where you could be totally happy with it. And of course, both that and the improved haptic engine is of course why they got rid of the headphone jack. And I'll be honest, I know I gave Apple a lot of crap when the headphone jack was first dropped from their phones, but of course, they weren't even the first one to do it. One of my favorite manufacturers, Motorola, dropped the headphone jack a few months before Apple did because they dropped it on the Moto Z before Apple dropped it on the iPhone 7. So I guess I can't really give them crap in that aspect because they weren't even the first ones to do it, even out of the major brands. But, you know, it's kind of hard to explain because the main reason why I use headphone jacks anymore is in my car because the Bluetooth in my car doesn't work. Yet, because this is an iPhone, my car lets me plug in through the Lightning connector and play over USB. But the weird thing is I've never gotten it to work. I don't know why, but I just never got it to work. I don't think that's a fault on the iPhone. I think it's just a fault on my car's stereo. Or maybe it's just a fluke. Maybe I'm using the wrong cable. But, you know, had that worked, then honestly I wouldn't even care about the headphone jack. Really, because, you know, from the very rare occasion I would be using a pair of wired headphones, I would probably just have the adapter with me. I'd probably just stick it in my wallet or something. Yeah, it sucks to have it, but... And I don't have it. I don't have one of those, so I can't plug headphones into this phone. But... whatever, you know. And I will admit, having the new Taptic engine, I got it right the first time, is really nice. Like whenever I'm 3D touching and whenever I'm like doing stuff on the keyboard and everything, like and even the new home button, like the vibration feedback is very, very nice. Even whenever I flick the mute switch, that's not the mute switch. Whenever I flick the mute switch, like it's still this Taptic engine and this vibration motor is very, very nice, especially compared to Samsung, because keep in mind, just 2 generations before this phone, they had, like in the Note 4, they had the same old vibration motor they've been using since like the Galaxy S2. Not even that, the original Galaxy Tab. And that vibration motor is abhorrent. It's gross, and it's really unpleasant. Whereas this is very, very nice, and I actually really like the vibration motor on this. I remember someone mentioned that if you go into, I forget which app it was, but there was one app they said that you could go into that you could, oh, this was it, the timer. So when you're flicking through this, like, you can't hear it, but you can feel, it feels like you're turning a dial. It's really hard to describe. And it's very pleasant. Like I actually really like it when you're scrolling through, and it's different depending on which one of these sliders you turn. Like they're slightly different in the variation. I think that's really cool. So you do get you actually do get something for them taking out the headphone jack. Yes, they could have done it. We all saw that Strange Parts video where he was able to MacGyver a headphone jack into it, but I don't think that they just got rid of it just for the money. I think that was I think that was honestly the biggest part of it. You know, because then they could sell AirPods. I mean, AirPods came out with this just right after this. So, you know, they could sell the AirPods with it. Of course, now AirPods Pros just came out. They could sell the AirPods with it, and they also were able to throw in those other features that the techie people would really like and maybe get them to shut up about the headphone jack. So, whatever, you know, there's no headphone jack, but, you know, what are you going to do? It's still... I mean, it still has the ability to use your old headphones, and, you know, it still has a lightning port. And I remember, from a repair perspective, I really hated it because that meant that this port's going to be worn out a lot more. But from fixing these phones, I haven't seen a major influx of iPhone 7s and iPhone 8s coming in because of lightning ports. I've never replaced a lightning port on an iPhone because I've never had to. I've never had anyone come up to me with that specific issue. So I guess I can't really say much about that. One thing I will say regarding the home button, though, is that yes, I love the way it feels, and I really like how the Taptic engine takes over the home button. I have a love-hate relationship with this home button because repairing this home button is just disgusting. Because previously with Apple home buttons that had Touch ID, if you replace an iPhone 5S, 6, or 6S home button, you would lose Touch ID functionality. Which is stupid, because if you replace the home button on your Galaxy phone, on these older Galaxy phones with the home button, you can still use your fingerprint sensor and the home button, unless you somehow screw it up. Like, my fingerprint sensor on my Note 7 is faulty. I can't log in with my fingerprint on my Note 7. So if I replace this button, I'll get my fingerprint sensor back. I can't do that with the iPhone. If the fingerprint sensor goes bad in this iPhone, I'm screwed, unless I go to the Apple Store. And of course, once Apple eventually stops supporting this and stops fixing it, which I don't know how long that would take, but eventually they would stop fixing it, then you're screwed. And then if your home button's broken, then you just got to go buy a new iPhone. So that sucks. So, you know, that's one thing that I really dislike, is that Apple has all these anti-repair practices. Now, thankfully, with the iPhone 11, they're getting a little bit better, like minusculely better, and I think we should congratulate them on that, because I think that's good. They're taking steps in the right direction, but it's very slow and subtle steps. And I think they should honestly, this is one thing where they would be able to copy from their competition and have repairability be a little bit more friendly to the consumer. So that's probably my biggest problem with the solid state home button. And of course the fact that it's harder to hard reset the phone because you don't have a physical button to push when the phone isn't on. So that's basically that. So we also have, of course, the screen is the exact same as the 6S, but we do have the stronger dual ion exchange glass that we had on the 6S. So the durability on this is actually pretty good. The person I bought this from didn't use a case. You can see it's a little bit scuffed, but it's not shattered. You know, the screen has some scratches on it, but it's not busted, it's not broken, it's not cracked. You know, even my Note is cracked. It's got a little, just like a whole little piece of glass just missing from the screen. That's not on the iPhone. Although the Note 7 has been used without cases for a long time, and there's no scratches anywhere on it. So this thing still, minus that little chip, if it didn't have that chip, I could put this in the box and sell it for brand new, which I would get a lot of money considering what phone this is. But the iPhone 7 does have some scratches on the screen. The screen does scratch pretty easily, but of course it's an iPhone. So cases and screen protectors are a dime a dozen. You know, whether you get, I know so many people have these stupid little cases, these little glittery ones. Don't use these. I think these were recalled because they were you know, burning people. Although, I guess it's kind of hypocritical for me to say that, huh? But, yeah, so this little case, you have this stuff, that's cool. But you also have, you know, actual protective cases like this. This is like a Tech 21 knockoff. And, of course, I always recommend UAG cases. As you can see, UAG cases. But, you know, one thing that's interesting is that because of this stupid camera lens, that means that just because they changed that camera lens, your old cases from your iPhone 6 and 6S won't work. So this is an iPhone 6S case. It won't fit because of that. So I can't put it on here, even though if you cut out this cutout right here, if you cut out the cutout, you actually could fit that in there, but of course it looked very ugly. And nowadays, I see so many more people with 6s and 6Ss that have 7 cases on them versus the opposite. So you shouldn't really have that problem. You should be able to find these cases a lot easier than these cases. But I don't know, your mileage may vary. But that's one thing that's, I mean, if you are in a pinch and you don't care about mangling up your case, you could mod one of these to make it fit on your iPhone 7 or iPhone 8, but what's the point? I'm just saying it's annoying how it's the same dimensions, so the cases almost would fit, except for that camera. Although I do think the camera design on the iPhone 7 is a little bit better than the 6 and 6S, because the 6 and 6Ss did sometimes have problems with these lenses would shatter. They called them sapphire crystal, which they never were. They were always glass. Apple was lying. But, you know, at least now, even with the aluminum backing, this sort of plate right here, it's a little bit harder to break the camera lens. So I've seen people drop these all over the place with no case. I've never seen a broken camera lens on an iPhone 7. I know people have broken the camera lens, but I'm saying in my real world personal experience, I've seen a lot more 6s and 6Ss than 7s and 8s with broken camera lenses. So I think that's a pretty solid improvement at least. So yeah, you can't use your cases anymore, but you have a little bit stronger camera and a little bit of a better camera, so it is what it is. So also, since we covered pretty much all that and the full design, as well as also, I didn't mention the buttons. The buttons are very clicky, they're very nice. I love having the mute switch here. I think that's very valuable. I think that'd be a lot more useful than having a dedicated Bixby button. But, you know, I think the buttons are very, very nice. They're very clicky, they're very tactile, they work very well. No complaints. It feels like a very solid, sturdy piece of technology. It is still bendable, so like if I take it right now and I try to bend it, like you can see it flex a little bit, even just barely putting any pressure on it. So yes, there is still the same issue that's cropped up with the 6 and the 6S. They didn't fix it with the 7. They fixed it with the 8 because the metal inside and the glass backing reinforces it a little bit more. But if you get an iPhone 7 versus an iPhone 8, you're going to have to worry about it bending, at least in extreme circumstances. In normal use, you won't have to worry about it, whereas the 6 Plus and even the 6, you would have to worry about it in normal uses. But the 7, you're probably not going to worry about it. Just be careful because the touch disease issue that happened with the iPhone 6 does happen with the iPhone 7, only it's with the audio IC. So if your iPhone 7 starts boot looping and your microphone starts going out, your phone calls don't sound right, then that means you have a problem with the audio IC, which is a very common problem with the 7 and the 7 Plus, and it's very unfortunate. Thankfully, I've never personally ran into that issue with anyone. I actually had a family member have that exact audio IC issue with their 6S, which is interesting because it crops up more on the 7, but just this aluminum, this thin aluminum design that Apple has just been an absolute failure in terms of actual longevity. So just like any phone, be careful with it, but at least you can be a little bit rougher with it than if it was a standard 6 and especially a 6 Plus. And the touch disease is way more common than the audio IC issues. So if you have an iPhone 7, you probably shouldn't have to worry about that. But I'm just saying, be careful. Make sure if you get one that you can actually test it and that it doesn't have any issues. And even with the iPhone 6, even if with that, I would still say to stay away from it because those issues are so prevalent. But with the iPhone 7, you shouldn't have to worry about it too much. So as long as you know what you're getting into, I don't think you're going to have to worry about the phone breaking over time, as long as you treat it relatively well. I mean, even if you're like that, I don't think that's going to kill it. Whereas with an iPhone 6 or 6S, or 6 Plus, that would probably kill it. And, of course, get a case. So, I just wanted to touch on that because that's a very big issue. Of course, you guys know me. I'm very concerned about the repairability aspect of a lot of these devices, especially if you're considering keeping it for several years, then durability and longevity should be pretty important to you. So that's one thing about the 7 that I wanted to mention. So beyond that, the only real thing left to talk about is iOS 13. And iOS 13 is fantastic. I just want to make sure this is still filming. Yes, it is. So, is this not even zoomed in? I don't know if this is all that clear. Whatever. So, iOS 13 is... How do I say this? I really like it. Now, I have been on Apple for years saying, Apple, make a dark mode, 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 make a dark mode. And Apple's like, look, we got you, fam. This year, dark mode. Finally happening. And we're like, yeah, took you long enough. There's so many people who were doing I remember back when this thing first came out, There were people doing jailbreaks, like everything Apple Pro was doing jailbreaks on this thing with iOS 10, getting a fancy custom dark mode in it, and it looked very nice, and they included cover flow and all sorts of cool stuff. I wish Apple would work a little bit closer with the people who do jailbreaks and not just sue the crap out of them, not just try to ruin their lives like an evil, disgusting company. I wish they would actually work with them and help introduce some of these features into newer updates to iOS. Kind of like what Microsoft did. Do you guys remember whenever the original Xbox came out and that thing was incredibly easy to mod? There was actually a story where someone got one of these modded Xboxes and brought it to Bill Gates himself and said, we gotta sue these guys, we gotta destroy them. And Bill Gates said, why? This is really cool. And he actually introduced a lot of those features, the ones that they could legally, into the Xbox 360. Things like, copying music to your hard drive and ripping your games to the hard drive, having an online marketplace, having places to download demos and stuff from online. All sorts of stuff like that was very, very nice that they actually listened to the community, especially the techie community that's passionate about their devices, and added that to their products. I wish Apple would do the same thing. I feel like they don't do that enough, and I feel like if they listened to some feedback, then this would have been done 5 years ago. I mean, heck, even with the iPhone 4 or 4S, they should have done it, because then you could have the white iPhone with the white and the black iPhone with the dark mode. It would have looked very, very nice. And of course, this iPhone 4S is on iOS 9 and can't be updated, so there's not really any way to add dark mode to it unless you do some type of jailbreak, which I'm not familiar with. It's been a long time since I've jailbroken a phone, and I don't even remember how I did it. I think I did it by pretty much accident. In fact, I might not even actually done that. Might have been a dream. I don't know. But this, I know I'm constantly I'm talking about dark mode a whole lot, but it's just cool. I love it. Everything is just very, very nice looking, and it's easy on the eyes. And also, one thing that's nice about iOS is it is very smooth. I don't like how it's not customizable, of course. I mean, because me, I always like to have my custom home screens, but it gets the job done. And I understand why people love the simplicity of iPhones, and I understand why it has its appeal. So it's one of those things where I get it. Even if I don't personally feel the same way, I understand and I get it. So yeah, iOS 13, it looks very slick. I love the new dark mode. There's probably some other features. I forgot what features they introduced with iOS 13. I think they had that screen time stuff that I don't really care about because I've had that on Android for a decade. But, still very nice. Still nice that they're adding improvements to it. And, of course, the iPhone 7 will definitely get iOS 14 for sure. I don't know about iOS 15 because the iPhone 6s was the newest one to get iOS 13. So this will definitely get iOS 14, and as opposed to the 6s, which won't get iOS 14 probably. But iOS 15 is up in the air. I don't know if they'll put iOS 15 on this. I'm gonna guess not. So I would say this phone has a good 5 years of life left in it in terms of support. Because that's one thing that sucks about Apple is that, yes, they update their devices for a lot longer, but your device can be only a couple versions out of date and nothing will work on it anymore. Like this iPhone 4S is on iOS 9. Yeah, we're on iOS 13, but that's still just a few versions out, and literally nothing works on this. Whereas this Galaxy Note 7 is on Android 6, and we're currently on Android 9. Android 10, I think, just came out, but most devices are still on Android 9. And that's only 3 versions, but everything, literally everything works on it. There's nothing you can do. There is nothing you can do on your Note 10 Plus that you can't also do on your Note 7 in terms of software, in terms of app support. So that's one thing that's nice. And then when you go back to Android Lollipop, most things work. Only a couple tiny little apps won't work on Lollipop. Or you'll have to get older versions. And then when you go back to KitKat is when you actually start having issues with compatibility. But iOS, it's kind of wishy-washy. So, and honestly, now that I think about it, the point of having iOS 9 over iOS 13 it'd probably be a better thing to bring up like an iPhone 6 or something. But again, compare the iPhone 6 to the Galaxy Note 4 or the Galaxy S5, everything still works on both those devices. And then when you go back a year for the 5S, you got a couple things that don't work, but whereas on the Galaxy S4, again, couple things don't work. So it's actually probably a little bit closer than I'm giving it credit for. So, even though updates last a lot longer, once updates are out of date, they're gonna break quicker, if that makes sense. But I still love how Apple actually keeps their devices updated for a lot longer. I actually really like that, except for cases like the 4S, or even the 5S before iOS 12 came out, where it was super slow. I think they might go a little bit too far with it, but the great thing is that you can always just not install the updates. And then you can keep the older firmware, but then for the people who want the update, they'll be able to get the update. So that's one thing that's nice about it, and that's one thing that I do still love about Apple is their software support is 100% unmatched. So if you have an older iPhone, it's going to keep getting updates, whereas your Galaxy hasn't received updates in like a year. So that's one thing that's nice about the iPhones. And honestly, I think that's really it. There's not really much else to mention. The battery life also, forgot to mention the battery life. The battery life is pretty good. I mean, for a tiny phone, this battery life is actually pretty good. It lasts not quite a full day, not quite. It actually lasts more than my Note 7. But this particular Note 7 is worn down like crazy. The battery sucks in it. But this iPhone 7 lasts a pretty decent amount of time. And that's one thing you can't fault it for. Like, yeah, they removed the headphone jack, but the battery's a little bit bigger. So you do get pretty good battery life on the iPhone 7. So if you like smaller phones, but you still want to have pretty okay battery life, the iPhone 7 is still a pretty good option. If you get the 7 Plus, expect it to be even better. So battery life isn't really a concern on these models. Yeah, it's not as good as the Note 9 or the Note 10, but, it's still a pretty good battery. And, especially it's not nearly as good as the 11s. But again, it's pretty good. You can't really complain, especially with how cheap these are getting now. The iPhone 7 still holds its value pretty well. The 6s are crashing like crazy, but the 6s and the 7s still have a little bit of value. I think it's once they drop iOS support, the value just tanks. But as long as it still gets updates, it seems like Apple products always tend to hold their value. Whereas, other devices, like their competing lines, don't seem to hold value nearly as good as iPhones do. So that's another advantage. Yeah, you spend a little bit more to get into it, but you get a little bit more of a return in your investment once you actually go to sell it, if you're a person who sells your phone. If you don't sell your phone, then it doesn't matter, but, if you do sell your phone eventually, then, yeah, your phone will be worth a little bit more whenever you go to sell it compared to, the equivalent Android phone. So that's one thing that's also an interesting thing to decide about whether or not it might make you want an iPhone. So I think I touched on pretty much everything. Yeah, it sucks there's no SD card slot, and of course the storage, 32, anywhere from 32 gigs up to 256 gigs. 256 gigs, if I can talk today. But the storage is good. That's a pretty solid amount of storage. I think it should have started at 64 instead of 32, but whatever, 32 is probably fine for some people who have a little bit lighter usage, and 64 is probably 64 or 128 is the sweet spot in my opinion. So, yeah, of course you have plenty of color options to choose from as well. And beyond that, there's not really much else to say. And also, I forgot to mention that if you want wireless charging, like from the iPhone 8, you can get a little adapter that plugs into the bottom and goes underneath the case, and that'll give you wireless charging. So if that's your biggest thing going from the 7 to the 8, but you also prefer the aluminum, then just get one of those little pads, and you can still have the aluminum, yet you can also get wireless charging with one of those adapters. So this iPhone 7 is definitely a very, very nice phone, and I'm looking forward to getting my hands on the 7 Plus at some point, because you know me, I love the Plus models. I would love to check out the 7 Plus, although one thing that's nice is that anything that I said about the iPhone 7 also applies to the 7 Plus, and the 7 Plus's performance will be even a little bit better than this because it has an extra gig of RAM, whereas the performance on this is still buttery smooth and really, really nice. I haven't had any lag or stutters with this, whereas with my iPhone 6 Plus, that thing was just horrible. Like, it lagged all over the place. It was incredibly buggy. It was an awful experience. Left a very bad impression of iPhones in my mind. But the 7 definitely doesn't have that issue. So it's still a very, very smooth device. You can tell I have all my apps on here, at least all my main ones. My main home screen is, of course, set up, and everything works fine. I can still scroll through all my apps, and it still keeps them in memory. Of course, there's no close apps button, but you can still do that. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. So yeah, do I recommend the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus in 2019? The answer is absolutely. Again, assuming you don't find one with any issues, this is still a fantastic phone, even in 2019. So if you're looking for an iPhone and you want one that's a few years old, still a good value, but it's still really fast, it's still pretty durable, still has some nice new features, this is a solid choice. So iPhone 7 in 2019, in my opinion, 2 thumbs up. I'm very, very pleasantly happy with this experience with the iPhone 7. I expected to not like it because of the headphone jack, but honestly, you know, I'm very, very impressed with it, considering its age and everything. So anyway, guys, this was the Teletech Studios with my full review of the Apple iPhone 7 in 2019. What do you guys think about the iPhone 7? Do any of you guys own an iPhone 7? Do any of you guys own an iPhone 4S or a Galaxy Note 7 or a Galaxy S7 or any of the other devices that I've mentioned in the past? What do you guys think about the iPhone 7? Or if you have any iPhone, just comment what phone you have. I think that's interesting. I think that's cool to know what phones people have. So yeah, that's the iPhone 7. That's my review of it in 2019, and I think it's a great value, and I think that you definitely should consider getting it, even though I honestly was a pretty big stickler of this whenever it first came out, and I'll be honest, I was a little bit wrong. You know, I was kind of bullying this thing a little bit too unfairly. It's still a great phone, and in 2019, it's still an excellent option. Anyway, guys, Teletech Studios yet again signing out. I'll see you guys in the next video, which should be the review of the Samsung Galaxy S6 per your guys' requests. Anyway, guys, this is Teletech Studios yet again. I repeat myself all the time, signing out. Have a good one. Peace.